the Radio Today podcast with Jen Seyderhelm.
Hi and welcome. This is a special community radio podcast. Last week, the CBAA Annual Conference was held in Hobart. The opening keynote was from Adrian Sargent, Professor of Fundraising at the Institute for Sustainable Philanthropy and Research Director at Philanthropy and Fundraising International. ABC Radio Sydney breakfast presenter and known force for change, Craig Rucasell wrapped things up, who Steve Ahern will speak to. Then it was the Community Radio Awards, and we'll also hear from CBAA board member Dave Houchin from 3RR wrapping proceedings up. Finally, the conference debuted the Community Radio Airplay Charts to further champion Australian music and acts. I caught up with CBAA Music Director Andrew Khedoori about that, and I'll introduce you to the Community Radio Airplay Chart number 1 and the National Radio Airplay Chart Song of the Week. Last week saw the annual Community Broadcasting Association of Australia conference in Hobart this year, with CBAA CEO John BIssett saying the conference and awards were an opportunity for the sector to come together, celebrate and learn. The opening keynote was from Adrian Sargent, Professor of Fundraising at the Institute for Sustainable Philanthropy and Research Director at Philanthropy and Fundraising International. He addressed a mix of fundraising challenges, such as donor burnout, finding new ways to raise money, and to make fundraising more sustainable and shareable for people on the ground. His key concepts of philanthropic psychology are identity, who are your donors, love, how do they love, and psychological well-being, how can we help our people feel best about giving. ABC Radio Sydney breakfast presenter Craig Rucasell wrapped things up. Known for his War on Waste series, Craig's takeaways were: enjoy the fun and freedom while you have it. It's a lot harder to have fun when there's editorial policies and lawyers in the picture. Value the people you meet along the way in your career journey. And this.
Craig Rucasell, you spoke at the closing keynote of the CBAA conference today. You talked about the war on waste and the things that you've done and wondered if they made a difference. My question to you is, do you think community broadcasting, community radio is making a difference?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the lesson I learnt from War on Waste was kind of contrary to what I thought. I kind of went and hassled the politicians, but in actual fact, the change tended to come from the grassroots level. That's where it came from. And politicians only really respond when they see community cares about something. So I think that community radio has an amazing ability because local issues are what people really care about the most. So community radio has a huge role in talking to their community, taking them through big issues, whether it be waste or climate change or whatever it is. I think it's got a great role. And I doing 702 at the moment in Sydney, I love the local aspect of it, being able to cover those smaller stories. For years I've been doing national, and it's very constraining because you can only cover things that touch on everyone, and you miss so many stories that way. So I think it's local is essential, and it can have a big impact.
The conference wrapped up with the Community Radio Awards. Congratulations to every single nominee and winner. Tasmanian Jim Parrish, OAM, was honoured with the Michael Law Award, which recognises an individual who has made an outstanding and sustained contribution to community broadcasting. The highest individual honour of its kind, the award represents Jim's decades of devotion to community radio, from building and maintaining transmitters to training new volunteers. Jim, who started his radio journey at the ABC in Hobart, has played a vital role in keeping local stations on air. RTR-FM received the Tony Starley Award for Excellence in Community Broadcasting. Tilda Joy from 3CR won the Jane Brownrigg Award for Outstanding Volunteer Contribution. Vision Australia Radio's In Plain Sight won the award for Best New Program. Fresh 92.7's Fresh Off the Block took out the top award for Best Music Program, and Heritage FM was recognised for excellence in Australian music. Wrapping up the evening, CBAA board member Dave Houchin from 3RR said,
Thousands of people contribute hundreds of thousands of volunteer hours every year. Thank you for sharing your stories, your languages, and for celebrating local arts, culture, music, and politics. Thank you for creating a place for a quarter of the Australian population to belong as an audience. We all know community radio listeners are anything but passive. They're a highly engaged audience, and the relationships and connections you make with listeners every day are very real and produce countless positive impacts in the world that is increasingly fragmented and untrusting.
Next year's conference will be held in Geelong, Victoria. Community radio has always been a space for people to share and discover new Australian music and artists. Also launched at the CBAA Conference was the Community Radio Airplay Charts, an easy-to-use resource for broadcasters, artists, record labels and other music businesses to work together to champion local talent. In the last week, 151 releases uploaded to amrap.org.au were played a total of 4,237 times on community radio. These charts cover all areas and genres. There is a top 20 national airplay chart, as well as metro and regional versions. Then top 10s across 6 genres, with artists, when they submit their songs, able to choose more than one genre, like indie alternative and pop. CBAA Music Director Andrew Khedoori and his small team have worked and are still working to make these charts available each week. And I spoke to him about the value of the charts and encouraging artists to submit their music to AMRAP.
These charts, these airplay charts, are for Australian artists charting across the sector, and the most airplay for those artists across the sector that have uploaded work to AMRAP. And, you know, they replaced the download charts, and there was always some different choices from regional to metro. And I think that just speaks to the fantastic opportunity that the entirety of the sector represents. Is that what we always say to Australian artists is that whatever kind of music you make, there is going to be somewhere across the entirety of the country that is going to be able to take on your music and provide you with an airplay opportunity. It's about finding your people. It can be daunting at first because there's so many stations, but if you look at those charts, you can see that there's so much different music being played. You've just got to use AMRAP to find your people and get that music to those people. And that's the thing, you do get that kind of diversity from chart to chart. One of the challenges for community radio moving forward is to engage younger people who have grown up in the digital era, understand music consumption quite different to the way maybe you and I have in the past. And streaming platforms are a given. And so how that dovetails into what we're doing at community radio is that we know that there are a lot of younger artists who are starting out and they know exactly how to get their track onto a streaming platform. They know how to get their track onto Bandcamp and those kinds of opportunities, YouTube, of course. And then, you know, the challenge for us is actually creating that awareness around community radio, because what we often say is that, as we know from recent reports that APRA have provided, is that, you know, Australian music consumption is very low. It's at 8.4%. And a big part of that is streaming platforms are not necessarily interested in foregrounding Australian music, but community radio is. And more specifically, community radio really does support new and emerging Australian music. It is one of the first points along that artist pathway to creating awareness and audience development for what they do. And it also gives them confidence to keep going because they've actually created an audience through the sector by putting their music on the community radio network. And so our responsibility is to keep reminding artists about community radio, keep getting that message across, because it's going to be a totally different thing for a lot of younger people who don't necessarily engage with it. I mean, we think that, you know, anecdotally, there are a lot of younger people who think that's something that their dad did. And that's something we have to change. We have to also get more young people making community radio that reflects their interests as well. The resilience and reinvigoration of the sector is really important, and both those things are really kind of two sides of the same coin, when it comes to Australian music and getting that music out there and watching things change and watching things grow even further, and just offering portals for the creativity of young people to be heard.
The Community Radio Airplay Charts national and metro number 1 this week is Back on the Road by Ice Cream Hands. The Melbourne band has been around since 1992, and I thought I'd share a little below as it's brilliant and something I only discovered via this new chart.
Gliding along in the slipstream, reality turning into daydreams. At 18, and where she goes, nobody knows. She's back on the
Ice Cream Hands back on the road. Now, wrapping up this podcast with the RCS Media Monitor's National Radio Airplay Charts Song of the Week. And it's the new collaboration between Tones and I, David Guetta, and Teddy Swims called Gone, Gone, Gone. I wonder how this came together. Guetta is the French superstar producer and songwriter. Teddy Swims American, although he's been in Australia across the last month touring, performing at the NRL Grand Final and at SXSW, among other things. Tones and I is the Oz Dance Monkey songstress. It had 378 spins on commercial radio last week, with the Nova Network providing 150 of them across its 5 metro stations. And that's it for me until the ARN upfronts. What's happening there, I'll update you on next time.
Radio Today with Jen Seyderhelm. Find more at radiotoday.com.au.
radiotoday.com.au